Kuzampo and welcome to this special program. I am Sherub Dorji, and today in this exclusive interview I have with me the CEO of Druk Holding and Investments, Ujjwal Deep Dahal. The DHI, the commercial arm of the government, has recently released its annual report for the financial year 2022, and we'll be discussing the key highlights from the report, and also since recent media reports indicate that operations for the DHI's partnership with Bitdeer Technologies Group is going to start off from this month onwards. So we'll also talk a little bit about that partnership through this interview. Thank you so much, CEO sir, for taking the time to talk to us. I thought we'll just directly talk about DHI's, the group's revenue. It has seen over 13.77% increase. We are talking about some 5 billion newtons worth increase in terms of revenue. So maybe if you could share us what were some of the factors that contributed to the growth in revenue.
Yeah, so when we talk about DHI, there are 21 subsidiaries in DHI, and when we look at the consolidated accounts of DHI, we are talking about 28 companies for consolidation. Yes. So each company has its own dynamics, has its own business verticals. Mm-hmm. So when we see a revenue increase for the overall consolidated account, which you rightly mentioned about 13-14% compared to 2022, is generally attributed to higher sales of energy domestically, so that has been a revenue contributor from Bhutan Power Corporation side, which actually recorded the highest revenue of all times. So that's one major contributor. The other contributor has also been from SMCL, which we do dolomite mining. We have increased our capacities in dolomite mining. Also interestingly, from Dungsam Cement also we have been able to increase the plant factor a little bit. There has been increase from Dungsam Cement, and also the major other contributor is also BOP. So those are some of the companies which has seen increase in the revenue, and hence about 13-14% increase in the revenue that we have seen in the consolidated accounts of DHI.
And within the same energy and resources segment, the sector, DGPCs, which usually contributes a lot to the DHI and the government's revenue, its profits dropped by almost 500 million compared to 2021. So it's not really significant when we look at the entire portfolio of DGPC, the Druk Green Power Corporation, but what contributed to this decline?
So there is a dynamics between the generation company and the supply company, which is the BPC. Mm-hmm. So when we see domestic consumption rise, automatically the export to India reduces. Yes. So in the recent past we have seen our domestic consumption rise. Mm-hmm. So because the when we say that we see a revenue decrease in DGPC, there is a corresponding revenue increase for BPC. Yes. But having said that, of course, the overall domestic consumption increasing also indicates that there is more economic activity in the country. Mm-hmm. But because the selling price of DGPC to BPC for the domestic consumption is lower than the export price of DGPC to India. Yes. That's why you see a revenue decrease of DGPC. Yes.
And if you look at the remittances from the DHI and its group to the Finance Ministry, it increased by 15.16%. By sheer numbers, we are looking at remittances of over 15 billion newton. And from the past year, we're talking from 2021 financial year, we're talking about some 2 billion newtons worth increase. So was there some specific strategies that contributed to this increase in remittances?
Right. So let's look at the numbers for last 5 years or so. And when we look at the numbers of remittance to the government by DHI, we have increased consistently on a CAGR of about 6% on the remittance. Mm-hmm. Where does the remittance of DHI to the government come from? It's in the form of taxes, it's in the form of dividends, and it's in the form of royalties that we pay. So as you rightly mentioned, in 2022 there has been an increase in the remittance by about 2 billion niltrum. These are generally attributed to, majorly attributed to three areas. One is definitely the taxes. The group taxes has increased by almost about 700 million, which contributes to the 2 billion. Apart from that, the dividend also almost by about 900 almost a billion, and also from the mineral royalty, as we also saw an increase in the revenue because of SMCL, which also indicates our remittance of increase in the mineral royalty from SMCL. So basically, taxes, dividends, and mineral royalty from SMCL is the one contributing to the additional 2 billion that we have been able to remit to the government.
Leslie, I'm sure the DHI and its companies, I've been told that you have recently met with the CEOs of the companies, and also any specific challenges that the companies in general faced in the last financial year?
Generally, the challenges, has been the attrition. So we have to, together solve this issue, make our workplace more attractive to work, especially to meet the aspirations of the new generation. That's what number one priority for us. Apart from that, other challenges in the last year has been in terms of hydrology. As you rightly mentioned, there has been a decrease in revenue from DGPC. Some amount of it, I think about 83 million units reduction from 2021 in terms of generation is attributable to the hydrology. So that's another challenge that we look at. The other aspect is also in terms of tourism and the level of passengers to be transported of 2019 has not been reached. But it has been better than 2021 and 2022 as the numbers show from Druk Air side. But tourism, COVID hit industries and scaling up has been other challenges. But at the same time also we're looking at how reliably we can look at our energy sector to supply to domestic industries so that the economic activity can be, can be pursued further to mitigate some of the challenges that we face. Other challenges for DHI, at least on the operating its own businesses, has been in terms of transportation for dolomite and mining. Sometimes we do face challenges there, but these are issues that can be sorted out. Yes. But basically, foreign exchange viability for investments, because eventually if we have to come out of this cycle to ensure that we have enough investments done, it's also a challenge of foreign currency requirements to do the investment. So those are areas that we look at very closely to see how we can provide the platform for investments to pick up so that we can expand our businesses to provide remittances, and that can be again cycled back to the economy for public services. That's
when I took a look at the report, it also mentions that the total expenditure of the DHI companies rose by over 25% on a year-on-year basis. Is it down to DHI procuring IT equipments, of course, for our investments in our digital assets and all?
So first of all, the expense increased by about 25%, about 6.5 billion or so this year compared to 2021 is definitely not from the aspect of the IT or any equipments being pursued. But having said that, now, as I mentioned, DHI has a portfolio of about 28 companies, 21 subsidiaries. The expenses increase because the activity or the business volume has increased. So some of the major attributable numbers for expense increase has been in terms of higher import of energy cost to service during winter, and as we correlate that with the higher domestic consumption. So that has contributed almost about 1.8 billion niltrum on our expenses. The other aspect is also higher energy cost of Mandishu compared to other hydropower plants is also one of the aspects. Materials used for infrastructure development, managing inventory becomes that way very important for us. So that's one area of excellence we are trying to do, which has increased about almost 1.3 billion. And also there has been significant increase compared to 2021 in terms of aircar fuel and other aspects, contributing almost to about 1 billion niltram. And also SMCL expansion, as we said. So higher expenses does not necessarily mean that we are performing bad, but the commensurate revenue and how efficient we are in terms of the expenses and revenue management is something that we'll look very closely to ensure the business expansion that happens with which provides higher revenue, also has corresponding higher expenses.
Of course, the price rise in the economy has a lot to do with the increase in expenditure. So is the DHI looking at maybe cutting down on some of the expenses, maybe look at the expenses again and see if there are any cutting measures that can be looked into?
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at expenses, the other factor in the expenses increase is also the human resource cost. Right? There are certain parameters that can't be controlled. The price, for example, the prices of fuel, which increases our expenses in delivering our manufacturing or service businesses, the 21 subsidiaries that work on. So those are out of our control. The controllable expenses are something that we look at very seriously to ensure that there are control mechanisms to ensure the controllable expenses are under check and controlled in terms of increasing our operating efficiency. So what we have to really look at and what we have been emphasizing at DHI and DHI owned companies and subsidiaries is that we look at the operating efficiency when you increase our business. That also brings in the aspect of how we do the investment decisions on a marginal cost, so that every unit produced, additional unit produced, provides the opportunity or the profit that we look at. But having said that, DHI is a company that provides social services and social mandates like the electricity. So we really can't look at marginal cost of production and not produce because it's an essential item. So that also has the difference in our increase in expenses vis-a-vis our revenue and our profit. That's one of the reasons.
Talking about expenditure, it's also noted in the report that the profit before tax declined by almost about 2 billion newton. We're talking about on a year-on-year basis about 8.71% decline in profit before tax. So how does the DHI, how is the DHI looking at enhancing profitability in the coming years?
Yeah. So if you look at profit before tax, a reduction by about 8 or 9% compared to, again, 2021 figures. But we'll also have to see that the overall remittance actually to the government has increased, as we talked about, by about 2 billion. The reason, I mean, the analysis on the profit before tax being reduced is, if you look at again, the same argument about a rate of growth of expenses vis-a-vis the rate of growth of revenue needs to be checked and managed. And that's one of the reasons that the PBT seems to have been less than compared to 2021. But again, as mentioned, marginal cost of investments, operating efficiencies are some of the aspects we are looking at. But even with those, we have to be conscious that some of the market factors in terms of expenses, which actually reduces our PBT, profit before tax, is contributed by market forces that we do not have control on, like sheer price rise in the fuel or cost of human resource or cost of talent and stuff like that.
The report also highlights on DHI's investments in foreign markets. We're talking about some $17 million US. The report highlights $5.3 million US in global equity and futures market and almost $4 million US in emerging markets, and also over 11 million Singaporean dollars was spent in setting up DHI PT Limited, a DHI company in Singapore. So when you talk about that, would it be right to say these investments, of course we know that DHI has been venturing into digital assets mining for the past few years. So when you talk about these investments in futures market abroad, are we talking about investments in digital assets?
No, the numbers that you mentioned, I'll have to recheck those numbers that you mentioned, but these are all declared numbers as per the annual financial statements. And these are not investments in digital assets, as the financial statement also would mention. But barring the correctness of the numbers that you mentioned, DHI, yes, does have a Singapore Private Limited. We established it last year. More so for us to facilitate some of our technology ventures eventually. Yes. But at this time we have invested in real estate through the DHI Private Limited company in Singapore. So that's one of the investment. The other investments in the things in the international market are in terms of private equity, public equity, and in fixed incomes. And these are not in the digital assets as mentioned. Yes.
Yes. So we'll now move on to Bitdeer Partnership with the DHI. Bitdeer, of course, is a leading company when it comes to cryptocurrency mining. It's a Nasdaq listed company, and we did cover quite extensively in our earlier conversation about Bitdeer Technology Partnership with DHI. Maybe, sir, if you could just talk a little bit about that partnership and the strategic.
So as we always talk about managing a balanced portfolio, ensuring that our risk frameworks are managed, it was important for us to look for a partner for investment. So Bitdeer, with its credibility and also being listed in Nasdaq, gives us that confidence. As you're aware that DHI has some experience in digital asset mining. So we were able to negotiate, collaborate with Bitdeer to establish this partnership. As we have mentioned earlier in the joint press release with Bitdeer and DHI, and also in the program in BBS, we are looking to raise about $500 million internationally, and invest that in Bhutan for digital asset mining. So that's where we are at this point in time, and we feel that this is a very strategic move in terms of how we utilize our resources, but also be in a very balanced portfolio, step into the digital asset area with a strategic partner which is globally renowned.
So we understand that the partnership has taken quite a forward step, and as per media reports, we can see that data mining center has already been established. I mean, the computer systems are being installed at Gedu. For those who do not know, I understand it's going to be a 100 megawatt project. So are there any specific advantages that Gedu offers when it comes to cryptocurrency mining operations?
I think it's more environment. Gedu is cold. There was flat land, which reduces our cost of construction, and more importantly, we also had the power infrastructure nearby, so that we don't have to tap onto long transmission lines and have more environmental destruction. So it was just available there. So it's a very suitable space because the energy used for cooling is less because of the weather, and also the power infrastructure was available nearby. So it was a very obvious choice in a lot of ways.
And maybe if you could give us a bit of detail about where the progress of mining center in Gedu.
Right. So as we speak, I think, and as reported by the papers nationally and internationally through Bitdeer, we are all set to operate by the end of this month, the 100 megawatt.
When you look at ensuring the success of the mining center in Gedu, I'm sure Bitdeer, from their part, they might have already looked into it. Considering there is this halving event in 2024, where the worth of a block of Bitcoin would be reduced by half. So maybe what impact would that have?
So halving is an algorithmically put in the Bitcoin network, so that every plus minus 4 years or so, the reward given to the miners for having solved it and built security into the digital asset, Bitcoin, the reward given to the miners is halved. So what this does is it also brings in an element of scarcity. So the element of demand and supply comes in, right? So as anything becomes scarer and scarer, the demand is expected to, when the supply becomes lower, the demand is expected to be higher. So that's how Bitcoin network is poised for inflation checking in a lot of ways. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is also Bitcoin is more evolving as an asset class rather than other functions of money. So that we have seen. Fourth halving that's happening. So if you look at the other three halvings and how the miners have actually been in business, is also an interesting area to look at. The prices of Bitcoin seem to adjust with the halving. But again, to be sustainable, to be in this business in the long run, we'll have to ensure that our operation efficiency is good. Our investments, marginal cost of investment, again, in terms of the plant has to be well strategized. But what if history or the past data shows what we need to be what we need to strategize ourselves for the halving is to be having an operational efficiency and look to see how the rewards actually match up our operational, our expenses, so that we can be in business.
So there are chances, as seen in the past, that the halving event might drive up the Bitcoin price.
We have seen that. So if you look at 2016 or the earlier halvings, there is a historical evidence of that. Yes.
Moving on, if we could talk about the partnership and upsides that Bhutan can get from this partnership, since its operation is going to be managed by Bitdeer, what are some of the upsides that the DHI will benefit?
So some of the obvious, clear upsides are from the revenue streams that we get in form of taxes from this operation in Bhutan. Also in terms of revenue sharing or partnership, because we are a strategic limited partner with Bitdeer, because the operation happens in Bhutan. So the revenue and also foreign currency for sale of electricity to the company. These are direct revenue streams that we look at. But beyond that, also it provides direct and indirect jobs creation. It creates an economic activity in the locality. So those are other indirect benefits. But also, if you look at technology transfer, if you also look at other verticals of investments that we can look through, having done the mining vertical in terms of using blockchain, and so those are other upside potentials that we can.
That's one of the most talked about disadvantages of mining Bitcoin is not just Bitcoin, any other cryptocurrencies that are there, is its power consumption. And if we talk about Gedu data center and other data centers that's going to come up through this partnership, and Bhutan's own data centers, the growing concerns about energy consumption, how is the DHI and this partnership ensuring that the people living in the locality or people who are along the grid line that supplies power to these data centers, what are the measures being taken so that these people get uninterrupted power supply?
So first thing, the consumption of power for Bitcoin network is to build security in that asset. So that's number one. So we are spending some amount of energy to build security in that asset. Beyond that, in terms of ensuring, a couple of points. One is our hydro is green, and our priority is domestic supply. I think we have mentioned that before, and that's what our act and our priorities as per the regulations are. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is also for the way I see it is also for the Bitcoin community. From the national side, our priority remains industry comes towards the end in our priority list.
So this partnership has ensured that during the lean winter months when Bhutan in turn imports electricity from India, the partnership will shut down the mining centers so that the domestic demand remains uninterrupted. So moving on about the project itself, the Gedu center is 100 megawatts, and then in the next 2 years we are looking at additional 500 megawatt projects. I'm not sure whether it is 2 or 3 or 1. If you could maybe shed some light on that.
So Gedu is the first phase, if I may say, which comes online by end of the month. As given in the joint press release, we are looking to design and see how we can raise financing for the remaining 500 megawatts. So as we talk, we are designing and seeing the potential both from the technical side as well as the financing side to see how this the second phase rather of the 500 megawatt can come into fruition in Bhutan.
And finally, maybe when it comes to digital assets mining, we have talked in length about that. What's DHI's long-term vision?
As I mentioned, the 4 specific areas of DHI we're looking at kind of a renewed lens. We have 21 subsidiaries, has its own challenges and opportunities. How do we look at these 21 subsidiaries? How do we, inject more investments or divest or make them more efficient is one of our areas. The other in the future, as I mentioned, are 4 areas. We look at technology, we look at digital assets, we look at energy and resources, and we look at mining and minerals. So on the digital asset space, as I mentioned, we are in the lowest vertical in the sense that it's the lowest risk in mining. Moving forward, our aspirations are how do we look at using this as an experience to build businesses in using blockchain in different applications. So those would be our verticals that we want to enter into, having gone into mining.
So that's it. Thank you so much, CEO of Druk Holding and Investments, Ujjwal Deep Dahal, for taking the time to talk to BBS. We are talking about DHI's recent annual report for the financial year 2022, about the revenue streams, about the remittances to the finance ministry, about the increase in total expenditure and the decline in profits and all. And we also touched base on Bitdeer Partnership with Bitdeer Technologies Group. So thank you so much, sir, for taking the time to talk to us. For all our viewers at home, thank you for watching. Until next time, take care and bye-bye.